So now I'm working on the mirrors, and these have turned out to be a little bit problematic for a few reasons. So first of all, this is the way the mirror looks. They're pretty big mirrors, much bigger than your average saloon car. Very, very heavy, and they already have one connector going in here, right? So I was hoping to be able to follow the same direction with the lead of the camera. Okay, so first of all, I want to strip this down a little bit. So this cover, this chrome cover, comes off. These were only on the what do you call it, the consumer vehicles. The commercial grade vans for the Delica just used to look like this, and then they stuck this chrome surround on for the you know, the consumer people, which I don't actually like this chrome surround anyway. I'm in the process of painting the car, so I was going to take this off, give it a good deep clean. The first step is to take this off, which was just held on by some couple of strips of that bonding tape. One here, one all the way around here, and then one on the inside here. So that wasn't too hard to take off, first of all. And then next thing is this lead is the 7-pin lead, because this is the top of the range of the mirrors available at the time. It had the motor here for closing, it had the electronic motors for changing the angle, and also this is a heated lens. So there's a few different mirrors available on the Space Gear, and this was the top of the range one that they had. So I was hoping to follow this same path with the cable and get inside the mirror, but immediately we can see, because these camera leads are so short, I mean it's only this long, right? If I want to mount the cable towards the outside of the mirror, which is a natural kind of place you want it, you know, you want to have a good view, then you can see the cable doesn't even reach all the way across the mirror, so there's no way I'm going to be able to get it to come out of, go through the arm and come out. Or I could mount it very close here on the inside, and I might just be able to squeeze it through, but when I open this up and show you, it turns out there's no room to actually bring the cable through. So it would be a shame to mount it so close to the car anyway, because you know, ideally you should have it a bit out here, right? And get a good view. So I have to come up with some sort of solution. So the first step is to take this mirror apart, get inside it, and then see what we can do. Don't be tempted to start cracking open these cases or something. I mean, you should never have to prise open things. This mirror here has what looks like a drainage hole in the bottom, you can see here, and actually if you can get inside that, there's a single screw, and that holds in place the mirror mechanism itself. So first of all, we'll take this one out, and it was just this one screw which was holding the positional mechanism against the frame of the mirror. Let's put that there. So now we can free the cable inside, which is just here. There we go. And now we can see the whole inside of the mirror. So make a note of which cable's which, and then detach them all. So I have white, blue, yellow. That's it. So these were the 3 cables for the positional motor, and then this adapter here, you can see this one here is the 2 cables for the heated mechanism, which you can just see here and here. You see these heater bars? So unplug that. So now the whole mirror piece is free. I can put that to one side. And now we can see the inside of the mirror. So still, there's no obvious way to feed this cable through, so I'm going to have to keep on detaching parts of the frame and try to find a channel for the cable. And then once the plastic cover is removed, we can see the skeleton of the structure itself. So this is how it looks. This is all very heavy solid metal, and the way the existing cable comes in is it runs through here and goes into the bottom of this shaft, and it runs all the way up this shaft into this motor housing. So if I take this cap off, you can see how the cable runs through, and it runs up into the bottom of that shaft there. So I could try to bring the cable all the way through, but of course it's not long enough. So I'm going to need some sort of extension. So online I found these extension cables. Which are the same 4-pin type connector. But thankfully, before I wired this extension cable in, I decided to test it just to make sure it would work, and it doesn't work. And I couldn't figure out why, so I tried using the spare cable of this as an extension cable, and it does work. So it means that, you know, maybe this cable was broken, but I bought 2 of them and neither of them worked, so it was unlikely that they're both broken. But then when I was testing it with a multimeter, so if you stick a pin in here, and then with a multimeter you can touch both sides, you can get to those little pins just inside there and touch here. I could see that only 3 of these pins are actually connected, so I don't know why they did that. It's advertised as a camera extension cable or a drive recorder extension cable, and as we know, the camera has 3 cables. It's got power, and then the video signal and ground. So I don't know why they don't bother connecting all 4. I don't see what money that's going to save, but they don't. And it took 2 weeks for these cables to arrive, and I'm worried that if I order another set, wait another 2 weeks, I'm going to be in the same boat. So in the end, what I decided to do was, I got some 4-core cable of this one. It's this is solid core actually, because it's going to be easier to crimp. It's similar to network cable, but smaller. It's only 4-core, and some of these connectors, and I'll just have to make my own extension. So what that means is I will cut the camera side off, put a plug on the end, and then join it around the same place. So there's still the issue of which way to route the cables. So in order to see inside, I'm going to have to take this motor housing off and then see how to feed the cable all the way through from here, up through the motor housing and out in the same way that this one comes out. Okay, so now I've freed enough parts to make room to take this housing off. And I'm starting to understand why wing mirrors are so expensive. They're one of the most pricey parts to replace. Because there's a lot of parts and a lot of engineering that goes into this thing. So by taking some screws off the inside here, I can remove the top part of this arm housing, like that. And then I can remove this flap, and then this arm is bolted to the main body. I can take that arm off, and then finally I can get to the motor housing itself and prise that off. There we go. So now you can see the motor. So this would be the main motor for opening and closing the mirror. Straight away we can see that there's not a lot of room here. I don't think there's even enough room for the cable, never mind feeding the plug through. Plus it looks like I'd have to take apart this whole shaft, and I can already see there's some grease inside. That means there's gears inside here. So taking this apart will be a bit of a mistake. It's got to be full of gears and stuff, and they can be a right pain to fit. I can just about see through here. I don't know if you can see. I can see grease inside, so there's definitely gears inside this whole mechanism. So I don't think I'm going to be able to feed up the cable through the same channel, and I don't want to run the cable on the outside because that's a bit of a shame. So what I think I'm going to try instead is run the cable for the camera up the inside of the body mount, bring it through this arm instead. Sorry, this arm here. So this arm is housing nothing, and then the way this fits on top is, if you look, the top of the motor is just here, and there's nothing here. And once this housing goes on top, like that, there's clearly nothing in here. This is just a spindle to hold the top arm in place, right? So if I bring it through the top arm, I can make a hole in this plastic spindle, which is super easy to cut. Bring it through the top of this housing, so you can see the top of the motor metal is there, this blue metal, right? So there's plenty of space on top. I've got all of this plastic here, this which is good, what, 1.5 centimeters here, but there's nothing running through here. So bring the camera cable through here, out of the side here, similar to where the heater cable comes out, if I can make it a bit wider. And then what I'll do is I'll run it all round the inside of the frame, which is, which piece? This piece. Like that. So I run the cable all round behind the skeleton, so it won't interfere with the motor mechanism for the position. Run the cable all around here to here, and then feed it through the bottom here. So I think that's the best course of action, and then it'll be nicely hidden. It's a shame I can't run the cable all the way through and then the inside of this plastic and through here, but there's just not enough space. Once this is bolted on, there just doesn't seem enough space to feed through, and I'll have to drill through this, and this is about, I think it's almost 1 centimeter thick, this steel. So this is not going to be easy to drill through. and I'd even have to drill through part of the shaft, so I really don't want to do that. So I'll bring the camera cable out of this arm instead. So the first thing to decide is where the camera is going to be. So I reattached the back plate to the skeleton, as I've been calling it. Also I'm going to have to be going through the rear cover plate. So I have quite a bit of depth between the bottom of the main plate and the surround. It's at least at the height of my thumb from the knuckle to the tip, which is more than enough for the camera. It doesn't protrude that high. And checking the inside of the mirror, the motor mechanism doesn't go lower than this skeleton part. Actually, this is the screw which screws into the bottom screw there. That's like the first screw that we took off, which means as long as I keep it below this metal piece, I can put it wherever I like. So I've got no worries at all about space. So I'm just gonna offer it up a few times, decide where I want it, and then the kit came with this drill bit to make the hole of the right depth, diameter I mean. So I'll just have a think about it and choose somewhere along here. I don't want to interfere with this hole because that means reassembling it will be very easy, so I'd like to keep it separate from that. So I'm thinking to have it somewhere between the hole and the outside. Now, don't forget to think ahead. When this back plate is refitted to the mirror, it's going to be using this self-adhesive tape, right? So I've just put a few tiny little pieces on, which is enough to hold it in position, and it'll be easy to take off on and off. So normally these strips will be running all the way down. You see that there's 3 big long strips here, and there's a big round strip here. But I've just put a little piece around all the outsides, so that now I can stick this back on in the right position. Which will be like that. So now this outer frame is properly spaced around. If I had drilled a hole through and then put this tape on, it would have been out by 1 millimeter or 2, which doesn't sound like much, but it would be enough just to make the damn thing not fit on the final step. So think ahead and picture reassembling the whole thing, and then you won't forget to do stuff like that. So I've decided where I'm going to make my hole, judging by the space I had on the inside here. I might have to drill through a bit of this casing too, making plenty of space for this mirror, yet still giving the mirror enough room as it has to bend in and out, right? So I can't put it right against the edge, or I'll never be able to angle the mirror slightly down. I never angle the mirror fully down anyway, and I probably won't need to with the camera there, so I'm not too worried about that. As long as I bring it in a little bit so I can adjust it up and down for normal driving. If you've seen this tape before, it's basically masking tape with centimeters marked on it, 0 to 9, and then it repeats, and that makes this kind of job very easy. So first of all, I lined up with the carmost side of this hole, so the inside of this hole, and I got the 0 there. Then I ran just the tape all the way along the same ridge of the plastic, right? And then at 3 centimeters I put another piece of tape going up, and the place where I want to make it, I moved it by 1 millimeter or 2 to make it easy for the tape, is 3 centimeters from here, and then 2.5 centimeters up. So I made this little brown dot here. So that means on the next mirror I just have to put this 0 tape in exactly the same place, and then it's very easy just to find that point again. So now I'm going to try using the drill to drill through here and see how easy it is. So that's what the camera looks like mounted in the mirror. Because the thickness of this plastic is going all the way through, this grommet is designed to go over a single piece of plastic, and then it's got this ridge here, you see. So it's meant to, this piece goes on the inside of the ridge, and then this goes on the outside. But because the plastic is so thick, in my case, I'm going through 3 times the thickness of this. It's more like kind of like a shaft that it's going into. So when this rubber piece was inside, it was compressed like this, and I just couldn't get the camera through. So what I had to do was very carefully with a scalpel, I had to cut off this protrusion here, right? So it's just more like a shaft going in, and then the camera was so tight to push in, I really had to push hard to push in, and it ain't going nowhere. So it's more than tight enough as it is. So that's how it will look in the bottom of the mirror, which I think looks alright. It's nice and neat, nice and discreet, and it's also very shallow on this side, so it shouldn't interfere with the mechanism of the mirror moving around. So now I'm going to take this case off, run the cable on the inside up to about here, maybe this way, and then make the new cable here, which will run all the way out to here. Okay, it's a full day later now, and I've sprayed all the parts. I had to wait a full day for the paint to properly harden, because I'm going to be touching it and moving it a lot, and if I hadn't waited this long, I'll keep gouging bits out of the paint because it will still be soft. There's still a few little spots which I'll need to touch up, like you can see here, but that can be done after it's fully assembled. So for the most part it's all done, and then I can touch it up once it's assembled. While waiting for the paint to dry, I went ahead and started making the extension cables. So this is the original camera side piece, and I had a choice of either cutting this one or cutting the extension side. This is the other extension side, so I could have cut this one, and I thought I would cut this side, so I've only got one join inside the wing mirror case, and then the extension cord will join to this piece, and then this will be in the body of the car. So this piece, I'll have to have 2 joins in the body of the car. I couldn't decide which was the best way around to do it, so in the end I just did the camera side. But already I'm thinking it might not have been the best idea, because I have plenty of room underneath this, like the skeleton part, like the main arm, so I could easily have fitted 2 joins inside this piece and had 1 join inside the body of the car. So I'll see when I put it all together. I might struggle with the car side for lack of space, but anyway, I'm committed now, so I'll go ahead. So now that I've sprayed all the pieces, I'll start to reassemble the mirror, and then once I fit the camera in, I'll turn the camera on again. So the first step was to route the cable through the motor housing So I brought it down through the top of the spindle and then out of the back of the spindle, deliberately at a bit of an angle, so I could bring it nicely straight across the top of the motor housing. And if you remember the motor housing itself, there's the motor, and that spindle, if I put it behind, is actually totally empty. So that's why I brought it out of that part, like that. And next, after refitting the motor housing, I could put the upper arm back in place. So that's bolted on both sides, and I have this convenient little channel here to route the cable through on this side. And now I've refitted it back to the main body. It was a little bit fiddly to route the cables through, but I got there in the end. So the top one is the heating element. These 3 pins are for the movement mechanism on the back of the mirror, and then here we have the new camera connector, so the camera will come up through here and plug into that. This is the bracket which fits at the top of the mirror here, and that black spindle goes into here, and then this bolts onto the rest of the arm. So using the pillar drill, I was able to make one hole all the way through. You can just see it come out there. So I can feed the cable out the top of the black spindle, through this hole here, through here, and then I'll have to make one more hole somewhere in here, and that's how I get the cable back out and then back down the body of the car. So it was complete luck that I decided to drill through this side of the upper arm, because this inner piece does not fill up the whole thing. There's a gap around it, if I show here, and actually the cable comes through this gap here, you can see here, and there's plenty of play. I can move it around, so I don't even have to drill a hole in this metal plate, so that was very lucky. So now the mirror is almost complete. All that remains is to fit the front cover, which snaps into place on these sides, and then you've got these 4 bolts, and then pop the camera through the new hole and hook it up and put the mirror back in after connecting the motor mechanism and the heated mechanism, and that's how it will look. But before I do the final assembly, I noticed that this inside part is not painted, which is a bit of a shame because the mirror was on its face when I painted it. So before I fit these final pieces, I'm just going to mask off round here, mask everything here, and spray this inner piece here white, and make sure I get this edge as well. And once that's dry, then I'll finally put it all together. Also, what I did is I hooked up this camera quickly and experimented over which orientation it should be. I don't know if the software is able to rotate the image, so I found out which side is the outside, and it's this mark here, which looks like a, what is it, R1. So this has to be away from the car. So if this was the left hand side of the car, it would be like that, and if it was the right hand side of the car, it would be like that. So I checked that first just in case. Okay, so I'll spray this part, leave it to dry overnight, and then maybe finish this off tomorrow night after work. Now it's the next evening. I sprayed this piece on the inside last night before going to bed, so now it's ready for the final assembly. Okay, so I've installed the mirror, which was basically just pushing it in. It's nice and tight, held by the rubber stopper. and this connector is here, joining it together, and then I've just wedged it between the case and the arm like that, so it doesn't rock about. And this cable is out of the way here. And that's for the camera itself. Let me get some light. This is how it looks. So it looks pretty neat from the outside, quite discreet. And that's it from the front. So I'll put the mirror back in, and then I'll go mount it on the car and show the final shot of it in position. So now the mirror is fully assembled and on the car. You can see the camera there. But my final problem is how to get the cable inside the body. I'll give some more light. So the cable's running down the inside here, and this fascia piece, which will be painted white, when it fits over it, it has enough room on either side for the cable to run down. There's a bit of a gap, but at this point where the arm comes out, then there's no room at all for the cable to get through. So either I'm going to have to angle grind the inside of this off and make a channel for it, which I really don't want to, because this is really thick steel. This is really, you know, solid stuff, and I think it's going to be a lot of work and very messy if I try to do that. Or I can do what I've done here, which is continue on this side, and then on the inside I've left off this little flap here. There's a little flap which fits on, and I feed the cable through here, over this piece, and then back in here. So there's a little white cap which goes on here, which I can easily make a hole in because it's thin plastic. And that means that I won't have to make any cuts in this metal, and instead I'll just make a little cut in that plastic fascia piece, which will be very simple. But that means that the cable will look like this. There'll always be this bit of cable looping over. So there's not much I can do to avoid that without cutting through this metal, which I think would be far too difficult. So because I replaced this mirror a while ago, I do have two fascia pieces for this side, luckily, so I'm glad I started with this side of the car. So I'll cut one and fit it and see how it looks, and then if I'm not happy with this cable showing, then I might rethink and cut through the metal. So I think I'm going to go ahead with the fascia piece method. So here it is back on the car, and on the inside, this might be hard to see on camera, if you look in here, I'll get some light, you can see that I've cut just a little bit out of the bottom there, enough to feed the cable through, and then the cable's going to come over the top here, go into here, and once I put this white panel back on, it'll look like that. So it's fairly discreet. And what I'll do is I'll spray that part of the cable white anyway, so it blends in, and also to protect it from the UV so it doesn't break down, and that's how it'll be. While the mirror was on the car, I made a little mark here in pencil, so between these two lines is just roughly where I want to bring the cable back into the body. But just my luck, where those two marks are lines up perfectly with this catch. So instead I drop the hole down a little bit. That's why the hole is down here, and then it clears this catch. So now the cable will come out and go through in here like that. Okay, it's evening time now, back home after going out for dinner, and I thought I'd finish this off. So this fascia plate has been sprayed and put back on, and it's all looking quite neat. And there's the camera, you can see it there, looking quite neat as well. And from this angle you can't even see a little bit of cable in there. From the inside of the car if you look right inside the gap there, you can just see like that little bit of grey cable. I gave up on the idea of spraying it first because it would have been just far too difficult to spray that little bit of cable. So I figured I'd put it in, and if there's anything showing, I could always use some enamel paint and a little paintbrush and just touch it up. But I really don't think there's any need to. And once the door lining is back on, I mean that comes to about here anyway. And you know, I mean it's so small, nobody's even going to notice that there. So that's about as neat I think as you'll be able to get it. So now I'd like to test it. And to do the testing, I've come up with another idea. So I'm going to turn the camera off, and then I think I'm going to need about half an hour to set some stuff up and then start testing. So now I have 3 of the cameras plumbed in. There is the front camera, which is connected but it's still hanging loose in there, and the passenger side wing mirror, driver's side I'll do later, and the boot lid, which again I've screwed it in, but I can adjust the position back and forth a little bit in the boot lid. So now I want to hook it all up, and I want to test the system and play with the config. Use the video feed to fine-tune the front camera and the rear camera. But the problem is, the only way I can get the system to show on the nav unit is to connect the battery, put the car into ignition, put the gear into reverse, and then the nav will start showing the powered up unit. The problem with that is not only is it draining the battery quite fast, but it's fucking annoying. Every time the door is open, the car beeps. Every time the car is in reverse, it starts beeping a different beep. So there's like 2 different beeps going off, and the battery's draining, and it's a massive pain. And each time I disconnect it, come here, tweak this little bit, go back in, hook it all up again. So on the way home from dinner, I stopped at Hardoff, the recycle store, and bought a few pieces. I don't know why I didn't do this years ago. I was rummaging around in the junk section where they have loads of these old power supplies. This one was 300 yen, which is 2 quid. And the rating is 12 volts and 4 amps DC out. 12 volts, same as the regular car voltage, so that's fine, and 4 amps means it's more than powerful enough to drive any number of accessories. This unit itself is only 750 milliamps. So what I did is I cut the plug off, which I don't want, and I just split the power like this. So here's ground, which is just done like, you know, like a regular bolt. And then here's the power cable, which I just split into 2, so I could put both the power and the accessory in at the same time. So it's a little bit iffy. I mean, it's okay for now. And later, I think I'll build a nice enclosure for this, because I think this power supply is going to come in very useful. So I'll build like a nice box, and I'll put some, you know, those like banana plugs in, and some screws and stuff like you get in the back of speakers. Then I could hook up anything I like to it. And also, you'll see this. This was 1,000 yen, again from the junk section, which is about 6 quid, maybe 7 quid. So the whole, it was a 10 quid for the whole pair. And this is like the non-digital TV, and it's got a bunch of the old-fashioned inputs. And so this is the input I want, this type here. So it's perfect. It's 4:3, which is not widescreen like the nav, but you know that doesn't matter. So 1,000 yen, can't go wrong, and then you know I can just chuck it out in years to come. So now all I got to do is plug in my power supply, and I think I have to boot the system up. Yeah, there we go. So now I can faff about to my heart's content, and there's no annoying noises from the car, and the battery's not being drained. and I can play about with the settings for as long as I like. Oops, that was my fault. So one of the settings at the moment is to auto turn off after a few seconds. So I'll go through the menu and have a play about and set it all up. This one I think for menus.